HST's gone off electricity. What is being done with this program, although the member opposite might have a perception that we are lowering the amount going out, what we've done is broadened it so more people in Nova Scotia will be able to get the rebate.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have any perception that they're lowering the amount. Her own staff is telling Nova Scotians they are lowering the amount. The minister speaks of the 8% reduction on electricity bills. Mr. Speaker, that has nothing to do with this program. So let me guess, for your 8%, so that the 52 members in this House get 8%, does that mean the lowest Nova Scotians making money pay for that? Those making $15,000 are going to pay so that every member in this House gets an 8% reduction on their electricity bill? Is that fair? Is that open and accountable? Is that made available to every Nova Scotian?
Question, please.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, reducing the rebate for the HARP program for low and middle income families and individuals does not sound like the NDP government is on the side of all Nova Scotians. There are thousands who really need this rebate and are going to suffer this winter when they are only receiving a maximum of $200 a day. In fact, Mr. Speaker, on September 4th, 2008, just over a year ago, the now Premier told the Chronicle Herald that the HARP rebate should be doubled from $200 to $400, calling the $200 too timid to actually help those in need. This is another case. This is another case of the NDP Premier saying one thing for his government and one thing for another. Okay. My question to the minister is this. Why is your government abandoning low and middle income Nova Scotians by reducing the maximum amount of the HARP program from $450 to $200?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The amount of rebate for has gone down but in one area, but has gone up in another. We have also changed the threshold. The threshold have...
Come on. The Honourable Minister has the floor.
The thresholds have changed, so therefore more people in Nova Scotia will be able to apply for the rebate. The rebate for electricity was $150, has gone up to $200, and so more people in Nova Scotia will be able to apply. It's actually broadened that it is going to be more people will be able to apply for a rebate. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is for the Minister of Natural Resources. During your estimates last week dealing with the DNR, you stated that you didn't know that the spruce bark beetle was much of an issue and you didn't know about it. And I'll table a copy of the remarks that the Minister made. This week's edition of the Inverness Oran quotes a Department of Natural Resource worker in Badek as stating, the spruce bark beetle infestation will likely continue to create problems in the forest for the next several years. Another local contractor describes the woods as a mess, and I'll table that as well. My question today is for the Minister. Does the Minister view this as a problem?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, the department does view it as a problem. Spruce beetle it's indigenous to the province. Does seem to be having a significant impact in Cape Breton, say more so than other parts of the province. And on a recent tour I made of the Highlands, actually I got to say I was more preoccupied with damage to pine, which I saw as more extensive, but we are concerned about the spruce beetle.
The Honourable Member from Cape Breton West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for that answer. The Crown Land Forester working for DNR says most of the foresters expect the pest will destroy most of the mature white spruce population throughout Cape Breton in the next few years. My first supplement to you is this. Can the Minister table in this House his department's action plan on how they are planning to combat the spruce bark beetle?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I've had some discussion with my staff on this issue. I don't think I can table a plan for the member today, Mr. Speaker. So I'm not sure there's a plan in writing, but there has been some discussion on that. And as soon as I have something that I can give to the member or give to the House, I'd be glad to do that. Okay.
The honourable member from Cape Breton West on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During estimates, again, when I questioned the minister about this, he replied, the department obviously indicates the outbreak of spruce beetle, and it says in particular between Inverness and Victoria counties. But they don't have, and they haven't indicated that there's a plan of action in place for that. My final supplementary to the Minister of Resources is, your own department, people in your own department working in Bedeque have identified this as a major problem. They spoke to the media and said this is going to have a devastating effect on the forests of Cape Breton for years to come. Why is there not a plan in place, and how soon can that plan be put in place?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to be aware that the member can hear me with my mic on, because I could hear him with his mic off. I want to say that.
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do talk to my staff, and this is one of the issues. I haven't been talking to the people in Bedeque, but my staff who work below me have been talking to people in Bedeque. And when we come up with a plan, Mr. Speaker, that my staff is working on, I'd be glad to share that with the member, with the House, with the people of Cape Breton, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Premier. Yesterday, the Nova Scotia Community College president sent a letter to her colleagues, which I tabled last night. It read, "We are now planning for the strong possibility of a strike. As you know, the union will be meeting on Thursday to set a strike date." End quote. The Minister of Education and the Premier have said many times they respect the collective bargaining process, but time is running out. My question to the Premier, will the government step in and avert a strike, yes or no?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've said, I'm not going to interfere in the collective bargaining process. I sincerely hope that the members of the staff of the community college will find their way back to the collective bargaining process, to the bargaining table, and will seek to reach a resolution of this dispute. I do not doubt at all the sincerity of the union on matters with respect to their membership. And that's not what this is about. But it is about having a process that works for both the union and for the management at Nova Scotia Community College. And the place for that to be resolved is at the bargaining table.
The Honourable Member for Bedford Birch Cove on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With all due respect, the Deputy Premier already did interfere when he made his ministerial statement in this House this week.
That's right.
The NSCC President's letter also said, "We have already experienced a cut in our 2009-10 operating budget. Further, the province will not be providing us with additional monies to resolve our collective bargaining beyond the current options." NSCC needs the Premier to provide additional money for the collective bargaining to work, and he won't do it. My question to the Premier, do you agree that the only way for the collective bargaining process to work is for the NSCC faculty to accept less?
The Honourable Premier.
The issues associated with the collective bargaining process for the community college staff is complex. It involves wage questions, it involves pensions, it involves benefits, all of which will have to be balanced at the bargaining table. My hope is that they will decide that what is in the best interests of the staff of the community college is to try to seek a resolution in the appropriate form, which is, of course, the bargaining table.
The honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Premier has told NSCC faculty basically to take it or leave it. And it's this stance that's going to cause a strike. This is going to cause a major disruption to the school year for students and anxiety about graduation, but this Premier, by his very actions, is suggesting he doesn't care. My final question to the Premier. Can you at least tell us what you recommend students do with their time off?
The Honourable the Premier.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to be very clear that, Mr. Speaker, I care very much about what happens at the community college, and I want to see a resolution take shape at the bargaining table. These are very difficult times. They're difficult times for the students. They're difficult times for the management at Nova Scotia Community College. It's difficult for the staff. We understand that. We also understand that collective bargaining is often very difficult on everyone. And we appreciate it. What we are not going to do, Mr. Speaker, is make an arbitrary decision. We're not going to do what the former Liberal government did, which was impose and roll back contracts. We're not going to do what the former Conservative government did. We are going to respect the process.
The honourable member from Cumberland South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. Could the Minister explain to the House who the caregiver program, the in-home support program, was intended to help, and why this government is doing everything it possibly can to deny as many Nova Scotians as possible access to such an important service?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable member for the question. Mr. Speaker, this government values caregivers, and we think it's very important to do whatever we can to keep seniors in their own homes and in their communities as long as possible. Mr. Speaker, the caregivers program that was introduced in August, as the honourable member well knows, is a program that was developed by his government, the former government. And Mr. Speaker, the people it was designed by that government to assist were people with very low incomes and very high needs following an assessment, Mr. Speaker, with some other criteria such as an income test and an age test and a certain amount of hours of care per week, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Cumberland South on your first supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to remind the honourable minister that she's the government today. She's the Minister of Health. We have a new Premier, new government, so now they can make any changes they want to make this program better if they so believe. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to table a letter today that I sent to the honourable minister on behalf of Harold and Yvonne Adams of Westchester. Mr. Adams suffered a stroke 8 years ago, which left him paralysed and basically unable to speak. He requires assistance each and every day for daily living activities such as help in and out of bed and for any movement, and also for food preparation which must be prepared for his consumption. His wife Yvonne needs to assist him 24 hours a day, each and every day of his and her life. And guess what, Mr. Speaker? They were denied. Why won't the minister help Harold and Yvonne Adams?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I indicated previously, this is a program of designed by the former government. But, Mr. Speaker, it was designed.
Order, please. Order. The Honourable Minister of Health has the floor. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, this program, designed by the former government, was intended to be a targeted program, not a universal program. Not all caregivers in the province are eligible for this program. This program was designed by the previous government to assist about 750 people in the province, those with very high care needs and very low incomes, Mr. Speaker. And as of today, we're on target in terms of the numbers of people who we see being found eligible to be in this program. Now, Mr. Speaker, this party and this government are planning our own in-home support program in the first full year of our mandate, and that will give us an opportunity to address some of the deficiencies in the former government's program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cumberland South on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the minister. I think what I heard there was an apology, and I also want to say, Mr. Speaker, that it'll only carry so long with Nova Scotians for this government to try to continue to blame somebody behind them. You, Madam Minister, are in the driver's seat today. You are the Minister of Health. You and the Premier can make any changes. You can make any changes that you wish to make. Are you running things here now, Graham? Mr. Speaker, I gave the honourable member.
No, the honourable,
I gave the honourable member the respect to listen to her.
Order, please. Order. Order. The honourable member for Cumberland South. Okay. Honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, the Madam Minister and the Premier are in charge of this government today. They're in charge of the finances and the programming. Nova Scotians aren't buying that. No more than the teachers are buying that you're using them fairly across this province. They know better. Mr. Speaker, too many Nova Scotians are being denied access as a result of barriers put up by this government. Will the minister agree, at least on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Adams, who only receive, by the way, old age security and his Canada pension, will she at least intervene in an attempt to help them review this case so that Mr. Adams can continue to live at home? I'm pleading with the minister to please do that today.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we'd be happy to review any of the assessments if members feel that the assessment was improperly handled. But, Mr. Speaker, I remind the members on that side of the House, particularly former government members, that they allocated a certain amount of money in the budget that's currently going through this House for this program. Mr. Speaker.
Order. Order. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I hear the member from Cape Breton West say we should borrow additional money, Mr. Speaker, in order to fund the program. And Mr. Speaker, this is precisely why they're on that side of the House and we're on this side of the House, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. It's our understanding that there are decisions being made around the placement of acute stroke units in regional hospitals throughout Nova Scotia. Well, it's our understanding that Truro and Sydney have already been selected as sites for these units. There are still decisions to be made around whether or not an acute stroke unit will be located at the Aberdeen Hospital or at St. Martha's in Antigonish. My question for the Minister, Mr. Speaker, is will the Minister please confirm whether there has been a decision made on the location of the third stroke unit?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member through you, Mr. Speaker, for that question. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Health has a provincial health strategy, stroke strategy, and in fact we are looking to enhance the programs that we're offering patients who are survivors of strokes and their families. We have asked the Aberdeen Hospital and St. Martha's, or those two DHAs, those two regional centres, if they will collaborate in terms of the preparation of a plan for the stroke strategy in their region. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And it was my understanding that this is a program that can't be split between two different locations, that there had been some discussion about splitting the program and services between those two hospitals. So if it can only go in one hospital, my concern is that if we choose St. Martha's, we have the opportunity to serve a wider area. It would also serve Inverness and Richmond counties at the same time. Whereas if we choose the Aberdeen Hospital, we're moving closer to Truro, where there's already services, and too far away to serve the people in Inverness and Richmond County. So my question to the minister is, if we can only serve this, or if we can only place this in one hospital, would she personally feel that St. Martha's will be a better location than the Aberdeen when it comes to creating the third acute care stroke unit?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have first-hand knowledge of the phenomenal services that are offered in both of those regional hospitals, St. Martha's and the Aberdeen Hospital. And Mr. Speaker, I have great faith that the collaborative effort of the healthcare providers in both of those regional settings will develop and propose to the department the best possible plan for stroke survivors in their area. It's very premature to have a discussion about where this is going to be located, because those regional hospitals are in the process of doing the work of collaborating on the plan right now as we speak. Nothing has been submitted to the department, and I'm not going to prejudge what will be coming in from that region. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Halifax-Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is an issue about providing the best service to the greatest number of Nova Scotians. And we feel that St. Martha's would be better placed to do that than the Aberdeen for this very reason. So I'd like to ask the Minister, will the Minister assure Nova Scotians today that the decision to locate the stroke unit at either the Aberdeen or St. Martha's hospitals will be based on facts and not on politics?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to assure the honourable member that a new era in healthcare planning is occurring in the province of Nova Scotia, one where decisions will be made on the best evidence, medical evidence, unlike the past 15, 20 years under previous Liberal and Tory governments, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations. The days are getting shorter and the weather is getting colder. Mr. Speaker, people are now filling their oil tanks for winter. In spite of this, people in constituencies across this province were wondering the status of the Heat Smart program. Well, today we had a little bit of information. It appears there's been a change, Mr. Speaker, in how this is going. More than that, more than a change. Can the Minister please explain to the province of Nova Scotia and the members of this House what the current investment, how many dollars are being invested in this new changed program?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is a budget question that I will be answering in estimates.
The Honourable Member for Hants West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Open and transparency continues. Mr. Speaker, we keep hearing a lot about the previous government, and I can tell you this, it was good on this program, $92 million investment in the Heat Smart program, and it yielded positive results for every Nova Scotian, Mr. Speaker. Rebates were given to low-income families, and an 8% point-of-sale reduction was placed on all heating sources, regardless of financial status. This was a well-thought-out, balanced plan. Why is this minister and this new government holding back the relief so many Nova Scotians require?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you. I think that the honourable member might have two programs confused. Your energy rebate is carrying forward as it always has. The only change to that is, of course, that all electricity consumption after October 1st has the provincial portion of the HST removed from that. Thank you.
The honourable member for Hants West on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure the people of Nova Scotia will be warm thinking about those comments this coming winter. Mr. Speaker, the NDP proudly rolled out the HST relief policy on electricity, yet there's been silence. It's persisted from this government on the Heat Smart program, and we're just finally hearing a little bit about it today. But ultimately, things have been changed, discontinued. Those HST savings will soon be washed away. Mr. Speaker, will this minister and her government explain to Nova Scotians how this can possibly be a better deal when they will be cold this winter and no funding will be provided in the rebates?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you. I am going to try to clarify that there's two programs. There is no Heat Smart program. We have your energy rebate program, which is at point of sale, and that has not changed. The only change that we've brought in, of course, is the electricity. As of October 1st, the HST will be taken off. The other program that I think that the honourable member is speaking about is the HARP program. There are some changes around that, but it has been designed around the fact that petroleum costs have decreased since that program first came out, and we also have changed the thresholds. So even though the oil part has gone down, the electricity part has gone up. So thank you very much.
The Honourable Minister or Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister responsible for the Emergency Management Office. In July, the Auditor General submitted a report on pandemic preparedness, and it had 3 specific recommendations for the Emergency Management Office. One of the recommendations stated that the office for which the minister is responsible should review non-government entity emergency plans to ensure that they adequately deal with a pandemic crisis. Today, we learned that the Emergency Management Office is not doing this and doesn't intend to do it. So my question to the minister, Mr. Speaker, is why is the EMO not complying with the Auditor General's recommendation to review these non-government pandemic plans?
The Honourable Minister of Emergency Management.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the chance to clarify some miscommunication that might have gone forward today. Tomorrow we will be introducing a bill that is responding to the Auditor General's recommendations that came out, and so tomorrow we'll be able to clarify that all with the bill briefing. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, there has been confusion and miscommunication, I guess, because we clearly heard the CEO of the Emergency Management Office say that he doesn't have the expertise, doesn't have the people in his office to be able to look at those plans. We, on the other hand, said that we simply wanted the plans to be submitted so that Nova Scotians know that emergency plans are in place for all of the essential services that Nova Scotians require. So the confusion just gets perpetuated. He was very clear that he would not be asking for that. In the light of the fact that the minister tells us that legislation is coming, my question to the minister would be, are you going to direct the Emergency Management Office through this legislation to comply with the Auditor General's recommendation, yes or no?
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Emergency Management Office.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm hopeful that I can answer more than just a yes or a no. We have followed the Auditor General's report and recommendation, and we are putting in legislation which will allow the government to be able to ask non-government entities, agencies to submit plans. At this time, non-government agencies here in Nova Scotia do have plans. We have been in consultation and discussions with businesses across Nova Scotia, utilities across Nova Scotia, that they have clear and concise plans for if anything happens in a crisis in Nova Scotia. At this time, the legislation is moving forward on what the Auditor General recommended. Thank you.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park on her final supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I think it's pretty clear that this information was not something the government wanted to share in a timely fashion with Nova Scotians. I don't even think the CEO of the Emergency Management Office knew about it, or he wouldn't have sat there today and denied that he had the capacity to receive those plans and review them. So I think there's more than miscommunication. There's a little bit of, perhaps ineptitude going on. But my question at this point would be that in light of the mixed messages and also the message coming from the Halifax Citadel-Sable Island member today saying that legislation was forthcoming, which I think did preempt an announcement of that sort. I'd like to know why the legislation is even required if the EMO agreed, and in fact the government agreed with the Auditor General's recommendations in July. It was said that government agreed with all of the recommendations. Why were companies and private entities simply not asked for those reports? I'm sure they will provide them. So my question really is, why do we need legislation in order to see those reports?
The Honourable Minister responsible for the Emergency Management Office.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The legislation is moving forward, and it is on a recommendation from the Auditor General. The legislation will be giving government the ability to ask non-government agencies for plans. That is going to be legislated. At this time, there is no need for Nova Scotian, the government, to see these plans. We know they have them. We have been in consultation with the utilities. They sit at the table at EMO. Nova Scotian safety and security is utmost on the minds of this government, and we are making sure that we follow through with the recommendations. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, the Attorney General has yet to clarify a commitment made to the people of New Glasgow. As he is well aware, an announcement was made in New Glasgow to build on their phenomenal municipal police services, and I'll table correspondence over the communications around that. My question to the Attorney General is, when will he live up to his obligation to New Glasgow and fund the position so well deserved by the New Glasgow Police Service?
The Honourable Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable gentleman for his question. My position hasn't changed from day one on this issue. The program is being reviewed, and once we have reviewed the program, funding has been set aside, as he's aware, and a decision will be made and action will be taken. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, to the minister's own words, obviously the Attorney General is fixated on other priorities beyond those in his own constituency. The Attorney General knows that the commitment to provide one officer for Aboriginal community police liaison and one officer for a youth court and school resource support member are more than worthy of funding. These positions are community-based, community-supported, and the officers should be on the job. The person not on the job is the Attorney General. Again, will the minister step away from the NDP's veil of secrecy, and as I said earlier, now becoming that of an iron curtain, and state that he'll support the town of New Glasgow, its police service, and enhance community policing for the citizens of his own constituency?
The Honourable Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for that question. I want to let the gentleman across the the way here know and understand that I fully support the town of Glasgow. I fully support the police. In fact, up till this time last year, I was a police officer in that community providing service. I am dedicated and committed to the service and good quality service in the town of Glasgow, as I am in all areas of Nova Scotia. And as the Attorney General, let me assure you that I will look at the security of Nova Scotia as a whole and not just a singular part, but I do share your concerns.
The honourable member for Cape Breton North on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If he shared those concerns, he'd act on the direction for his own constituency, for the Glasgow Police Service, for Aboriginal and youth police officers that should be on the job today. And it's very obvious that the Minister, the Attorney General, has a disturbing pattern of working against municipal police services and municipalities in this province. The good people of New Glasgow and across Nova Scotia expected more from the Attorney General and his Premier, who said they would honour previous government commitments, and what was tabled was clearly a previous government commitment. Since the Attorney General won't speak to the matter and can't seem to speak to the matter, then I'd like to turn, for my final supplementary, to the Premier, who said he would honour commitments. Can the Premier inform this House if his NDP government will honour the $200,000 two-officer commitment to the New Glasgow Police Service, or is it just another raw deal for Nova Scotia municipalities in this province?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member opposite for the question. I want to assure him that I have complete confidence in the work that's being done by the Attorney General. He has reviewed. He is in the process of reviewing these allocations. He said it's under review. He's going to make the best decision for the people of Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Natural Resources. Mr. Speaker, in August of this year, the provincial and federal governments announced $14 million for silviculture funding in our province. Government says that this injection will create more than 400 jobs, help the ailing forestry industry. My question to the Minister, where is government investing this funding, and when will the jobs be created?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The funding is over 2 years, so we would certainly be expecting that silviculture treatments that would occur out of the 7 categories that the province funds. And I think we're going to reevaluate those categories to see whether or not we should reinvest or invest more in some than in others. But those treatments should be ongoing. You know, as you can do them. Obviously, there'd be some that would be weather related, like tree planting. You wouldn't do in January, but it would be an ongoing spending of money that has been allocated both from the federal government and us as well.
The honourable member for Kings West on your first supplementary.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my office's repeated attempts to contact the Department of Natural Resources for information on this funding, as well as other issues of financial support, went unanswered. The Strathlorne Forestry Nursery has been a major employer in Inverness County for more than 20 years. There is worry amongst employees at the nursery that they could be laid off in the future. My question to the Minister, why did officials at your department ignore my office's request, and will Strathlorne receive a portion of the announced funding to stop any perceived layoffs?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
I'm not sure that the officials in my office ignored your request. I just may not have given you an answer yet, but if the member wants to talk to me after question period, I'll be glad to deal with it.
The honourable member for Kings West on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the previous government announced in April 2009 that more than $1.1 million would be committed to Strathlorne. However, Mr. Speaker, when this funding was announced, the province said this project would include a Minister's Community Advisory Committee. The purpose of the committee is to work with the department to identify and evaluate options and implement necessary changes. My question to the Minister, has the committee been struck?
Order. Time has expired. Okay. The time for oral question period has expired. I'll recognize the opposition House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, would you please call resolution number 308.
Resolution number 308. The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to stand in my place today and speak on resolution number 308. And just in case, Mr. Speaker, that there are some people here or in the province who don't realize what this resolution is, I'm going to, or have forgotten what it is, particularly the members in the House, I'm going to read the resolution again. Whereas Acrobat Research Limited has received over $1.7 million from the province and Nova Scotia Business Inc. in startup loans and payroll rebates since 2003, and whereas Canso and Shettycamp are about to lose the cornerstone of their economies when Acrobat shuts down its doors of the call centres on October 29th of this year and lays off 48 workers in Canso and 38 workers in Shettycamp. And whereas the Premier has promised to extend assistance to the people of Canso and Shettycamp. Therefore, be it resolved, Mr. Speaker, that the Premier inform the people of Shettycamp and the people of Canso specifically how he will assist them and when they can expect this assistance. Mr. Speaker, Acrobat Research Limited are going to close on October 29th, call centres in Shettycamp and Canso. And Mr. Speaker, layoffs will affect 38 workers, as I said before, in Shettycamp and 48 workers in Canso. Now, Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotia Business Inc., their raison d'etre was over the past number of years was to bring business into the province. But it seems to me that they've been doing a lot of work on call centre placements throughout this province, in various parts of the province, and for various lengths of time. The difficulty with putting all their eggs in one basket, Mr. Speaker, is that call centres come and go. And this is a situation where this investment has been placed there, and now it's about to be lost. And I might add, Mr. Speaker, that NSBI and the current government takes great pains to talk about the fact that they have instituted this payroll rebate system, and the previous government were doing the same thing when in fact the payroll rebate system came into place under the Liberal government of John Savage and Russell McClellan at the time that those two premiers were in office, and it was passed on when we left office to the Conservative government and now to the NDP opposite. Mr. Speaker, but what was different, Mr. Speaker, is in the payroll rebate system that we had in place, we didn't need a bureaucracy like NSBI to put it in place. We did it through economic development. And it worked. And today, NSBI, with its top-heavy cast of characters over there that are trying to convince Nova Scotians that they're doing well for this province, when in fact they've just piggybacked on the payroll rebate system that is now in place in this province for over 10 years. I think that this government has to take a serious look at the future mandate of NSBI, and I'll be speaking to that in more detail when the estimates of economic development slash NSBI, who don't seem to be responsible to any taxpayers in this province. And if you look at the budget presented this year, you'll see very little, if no reference to NSBI, its personnel, its budget, or the kinds of salaries that are being paid, or in fact, the kinds of initiatives they're putting forward for the future, because none of that you'll find there, Mr. Speaker, none of it. And it's for that reason that I believe that the kind of economic generator that NSBI has put into this province over the past few years is very tenuous. And I believe, and I think that Dr. Ham, when he was Premier, was sincere when he decided that he was going to separate the NSBI from economic development, one being an agency to develop policies for the future, that being economic development, and the other one to look at loans in this province that could meet the required tests, and as a result, investments will be placed in the various sections of this province to spur economic growth in areas that needed it, namely areas of rural Nova Scotia and Cape Breton. Well, what's happened is that both of these agencies, Mr. Speaker, are now giving out money when the test is not met by NSBI, a business test, then of course economic development gets involved and finds a political reason to give some money to a particular place or concern throughout the province, or business concern. But, you know, Acrobat Research, for example, is based in Toronto, and it talks about slowdown in the economy as a reason for closure. Now, CANSO was started in 2003 with $100,000 from the province for startup, recruitment, and training costs, and NSBI agreed to give $420,000 in payroll rebates over 5 years. Shetty Camp was opened in 2006 with $350,000 from the province for startup infrastructure costs, and NSBI agreed to give $850,000 in payroll rebates over 6 years. And the Premier has said, quote, "What we will extend, of course, is all of the assistance we can for those workers, and labour and workforce development will be there to provide transition services," close quote. That quote, Mr. Speaker, was in September 4th Chronicle Herald this year. Now, Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, these areas are suffering from a government who has not kept their promises in various other ways, not the least of which is the fact that the government is virtually silent on how they're going to assist these communities in light of the fact that they're going to lose these call centre operations, which are, and I will admit, Mr. Speaker, tenuous to begin with. You know, none of these call centres ever own anything in the community. They come in, they set up, they do a book of business, and when that book of business is gone, they're gone. And that is unfortunate for some communities. I would think that NSBI and / economic development, who are responsible, by the way, to the taxpayer directly, will try to come up with some better ways to provide employment opportunities for areas in rural Nova Scotia that desperately need it. Now, Mr. Speaker, let's talk about rink cuts for a moment and the promise of this government in those same areas that need an injection into their local economies in order to not only to provide jobs, but to bring some source of pride back to the communities because of the fact that they need particular infrastructure funding to support, in this case, rinks. Mr. Speaker, Inverness has 6 rinks affected right now. Al McGuinness Sports Centre, Port Hood, and District Recreation Commission, Dr. Bernie McLean Recreation Centre, Inverness Area Commission, Mabu Athletic Centre, Mabu Athletic Centre Society, North Inverness Recreation Centre, Shetty Camp, Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre, which of course is in the town of Port Hawkesbury, the Waikagama Arena in Waikagama, and the Consolidated Recreation Association. And Antigonish, Mr. Speaker, has 2 rinks affected. Antigonish area, St. FX and St. Francis Xavier University, the town and the university. Cutting the rink revitalization program has a larger impact on rural communities than simply upgrading facilities. And the government should know that, Mr. Speaker. If the government was serious about doing something in these areas, they could send a message by providing the funding for those rinks desperately needed to give the assurance to those people that they haven't forgotten about them entirely, even though 2 of the communities I mentioned are going to lose their call centres. Mr. Speaker, the situation here is one of, and as I said, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to talk at length when estimates come up for economic development. And I'm going to tip the minister off that I'm going to be asking for a lot of information on just how much authority this government has over Nova Scotia Business Inc. And are we ever going to get to a stage where Nova Scotia Business Inc. start being responsible to the taxpayers of this province who pay their funds, pay their monies, pay their salaries, and give them a mandate to go out and try to revitalize the economy of this province, Mr. Speaker. So I'm going to give the minister a heads up on that I'm going to be asking him questions during those estimates. But in the meantime, Mr. Speaker, I would hope that this government would give some thought to seeing a revitalization of the communities I mentioned today because they desperately need it, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I guess I'm going to start off by thanking the honourable member that just spoke before me and thank him for providing me with the heads up, and I'll certainly make note of that, and I look forward to the questions during estimates, and I guess I want to say things, and maybe maybe I misread what was it? It was number 308, was it? Because I mean this in all due respect to the honourable member that just spoke, but I thought we were going to speak more about contact centres and about, with particular reference to Chetty Camp. And I've heard NSBI get a lot of attention, and I've heard rinks being talked about, and I also heard some other things. But I'm going to try to concentrate my efforts with respect to contact centres. And I want to say this, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I want to say that this is tough times in Nova Scotia. The last year, the last 2 years have been very, very, very hard on Nova Scotians. And I'd be the last one to stand up here and preach and say how good we have it here in Nova Scotia, although we do have it good in some ways, but I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that good Nova Scotians have lost jobs in the province of Nova Scotia. Now, having said that, Mr. Speaker, contact centres have been around for a while. A few things that I want to say about contact centres is that, first of all, that in the province of Nova Scotia alone, contact centres provide somewhere close to 19,000 jobs. And, Mr. Speaker, those jobs, for the most part, are in rural Nova Scotia, where we need the jobs the most. So I know that contact centres in the province of Nova Scotia, since their origin, it's like most things. It's been a bit of an evolution for contact centres in Nova Scotia. The contact centres, we've got I hope it's fair for me to mention Converges, that's been around for a long time. Certainly employs well over 1,000 people in the province of Nova Scotia. Good paying jobs. I say paying jobs because on the average, and many people may not know this, and I talk about evolution, contact centres have evolved to be well-paying jobs. They have an average payroll or for individual payroll of in the vicinity of $40,000 a year for individuals. Now, Mr. Speaker, in rural Nova Scotia, that's not too shabby an income. And if you have two incomes coming into the same household, that's $80,000 per family. And for something that we want to criticize, they perform a very vital service in the province of Nova Scotia. Not only to mention the job opportunities, but let's talk about the spin-offs as a result of those job opportunities that are created. Let's talk about those 19,000 jobs that produce. Let's consider about the direct and indirect benefits to the entire province. Let's think of the direct benefits when it comes to the taxes as a result of that. The impact it has on grocery stores, on department stores, on eat-out, on taxis, all those things that impact on our economy. And so I wouldn't be too eager or too quick to throw condemnation at contact centres. I think they serve a vital service. I heard the honourable member speak about NSBI. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I had a little trouble getting that one out. And, you know, NSBI performs a valuable service, and I promised myself I wouldn't get up here and try to defend or try to take up my time and talk about NSBI, because we will do that during estimates. And I know NSBI will be here, and I certainly welcome the opportunity for the member opposite to ask appropriate questions during estimates. One of the things that I heard the honourable member talk about, and he asked the question was related to Acrobat and about the closing down of that facility, and wanted to know what the province of Nova Scotia, what this government was doing for the laid-off workers in Acrobat and around Chetty Camp. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, is that this has been a partnership within government. that there's been a lot of departments that have been involved in a lot of consultation, labor, workforce development being one of them, certainly economic and rural development being another one, and certainly, Mr. Speaker, NSBI have been there as well. And what we will do and what we will continue to do is talk to those communities and those individuals that are affected by any type of layoff that goes on in Nova Scotia. We want to talk about, and I'm trying to be so restricted here, and I'm trying to show some restraint, but it's so tempting for me to talk about NSBI and government pay rebates, and I'm sort of kind of hedging around it because I know it's going to come up during estimates, but they serve a vital service in the province of Nova Scotia. One of the things that I often boast about to all Canadians and certainly Nova Scotians and to all those people that I meet internationally is that the greatest resource we have in the province of Nova Scotia is people. We've got the best human resource in the world, and I've had people say that to me from abroad, people that come here internationally. And one of the things, and I think I might have mentioned in the House, there was a trade mission here from India a couple weeks ago. And as we were sitting down to dinner, they leaned over to me and they said, Minister, do you know what the best thing is that attracts us to Nova Scotia? And I said, well, no, I think I know, but I'd like to hear from you. And he went like that, beat on his heart. He says, because you've got heart. He says, the people in the province of Nova Scotia have got heart. And that's why we can attract call centers. That's why we can attract people from those foreign markets to come here, set up, and do business and employ good Nova Scotians. Have Nova Scotians working, have Nova Scotians employed. That's one of the goals of economic and rural development, and I want to stress the word rural, because those contact centers that we want to talk about here this evening are located for the most part in rural Nova Scotia. When we talk about oat migration, we're not talking about oat migration as much here in Halifax. We're talking about oat migration in the Annapolis Valley. We're talking about oat migration in Cape Breton. We're talking about oat migration in Shelburne. We're talking about oat migration because some of those individuals that are leaving those rural communities are coming to the bigger centers, and that includes Halifax. Unfortunately, there's a good number of them that are going to larger communities, which include centers outside of Halifax. So call centers have served a very useful purpose in the province of Nova Scotia, and they continue to do that. I mentioned Converges earlier, and Converges, and I certainly don't know the date off the top of my head, Mr. Speaker, but they've certainly been around for a long time. They're certainly not what I would consider a fly-by-night company. And I would think that I personally take exception to that sleight of the hand comment when you refer to a company that's fly-by-night when they've been around for so many years and providing such a valuable service to the province of Nova Scotia and to the citizens of this province. With that, Mr. Speaker, I will take my seat.
Thank you. The honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to stand this afternoon and have a few minutes to speak to what is a very important issue. And I want to start talking about this call center closing by saying I'm pleased that they had some notice. I come from Windsor area and represent that area. As most of you know, we've had a call center closing in recent months, and it is not a pleasant thing to go through for any community. And I'm sure that Cheticamp, and I know Canso, having struggled along for quite some years, is probably feeling pain from this and quite a pinch to their economy. It will only make things a little more drastic for them in small villages like Canso and in Cheticamp as well. And it is quite surprising the numbers of people actually in those communities that work at these call centers. And the kinds of people that work in these call centers come from all backgrounds, Mr. Speaker. We see kids going to university and high school even in some cases. We see seniors who are looking for a little something extra to do. We see full-time and part-time and a variety of things. And these are all good people who enjoy that kind of work for the most part. And you have to be a certain kind of person to work in one of those call center type places because from my experience, it's not always the most pleasant thing to have to put up with either incoming or the outgoing, or trying to meet quotas and things like that. It's actually quite a tough challenge to meet. The outgoing, you have to make so many outgoing calls and contacts, and as such, it can be quite a stressful job, although I worked in a call type center in the EMS world, as one of my colleagues across the way would know, and I don't know that he ever experienced that piece, but maybe he should, Dave, maybe you should. It is challenging, regardless of what that call center represents. It is a challenge, and it's not for everybody, and I think he's saying no, and that's why he may not have took that challenge on, but there you go. Not here. I see what you're saying. Oh, well, I'm sure they all appreciate that. But anyway, Mr. Speaker, certainly the call center business has provided a number of jobs to Nova Scotians in various places. The Honourable Minister is calling this a contact center. We often have referenced it as a call center. Perhaps there is a correct, I've never heard it called a contact center before this afternoon, so Minister, I'll investigate further and see which is correct here. Maybe both are. But again, the important thing is the jobs here. We need to see what we're going to do for these folks in Canso and in Cheticamp and in the Rizzo. It states, whereas the Premier has promised to extend assistance to the people of Canso. It will be interesting to see what that means. What is the Premier going to do to extend assistance to the good people of Canso and Cheticamp? And I hope we've heard a lot about a variety of different things here with regards to NSBI and rural economic development. And we have a huge investment in call centers in this province, and these two are no exceptions. Millions of dollars being invested through a variety of programs, and we need to find a way to put these people back to work. I started by saying I was glad to see that some notice was given. The center in Windsor that closed was given no notice. There was a sign on the door the day they went to work. No notice whatsoever. And these people have struggled and are still struggling today to try and get what was worked, or what was owed rather. They worked the hours, were not paid. They're fighting some third-party company trying to look after the funding, the assets. Everybody's got their hand in looking for their piece, and I can understand that. When businesses fold up, that happens. But the people have to be looked after first, Mr. Speaker. That is what is most important in our communities in this province, especially right now, Cheticamps, Canso, and other places that are struggling along when it comes to job loss. And we've seen a bit of positive, albeit a small bit of positive light, I think, in the economy turning hopefully on the upside. It's going to take some time, a number of months, maybe another year and a half, 2 years before we may see what we saw prior to this economic downturn in this province. So again, what are we going to do for these people, these jobs? Are we going out? Are we looking for more call centers? Are we looking for what kind of business are we looking to bring in? Are we going to extend EI benefits? Is that the plan? Are we going to financially assist these people? It's a struggle, there's no question, and these families are going to be faced with challenges as we go through the winter months and they have no jobs. There are a lot of people in the call center industry, as I've said, and the spin-offs that come from that, people think that they're dead-end jobs. I've heard that comment on this type of business in Nova Scotia. I don't think it's a dead-end job. I think, as I said, this is a challenging job for people, and a lot of people enjoy this. This is hardly a dead-end job. This is a career for some people, and in my case in Windsor, not in my case, but in the centre that I represented, people had been there since it opened and enjoyed very much and were long-term employees there and would still be there today had that facility been open, Mr. Speaker. And again, we need to figure out what we're going to do in these small communities right now that are losing jobs and don't have a lot to offer. We see other industries, not only the call center industries. Again, in my area, we see Fundy Gypsum, a large employer in its heyday of 150 people, $50,000 a year annual salary, Mr. Speaker. That equates to about $8 million into the local economy. So you can do the math. You might look at 38 or whatever the number of 38 workers in Cheticamp, 48 in Canso. That's a third of that $8 million if you did the math and the spin-offs. The jobs aren't $50,000 a year, I'm certain, but there's still a huge spin-off to those businesses in towns like Canso that have struggled for many years, and they're now trying to figure out what are we going to do except struggle along again. Another hit. We need to figure out what we're going to do for the good people of Canso and Cheticamp. Job replacement. I'm hoping and hopeful that the government will see fit to seek out maybe there are other centers that are interested in coming to these areas. We have trained people that are more than able to obviously work in these centres, and it would be nice to be able to offer something to these fine folks. Back on Fundy Gypsum for just a second, as I said, there are a large number of people working. Things are turning around. We expect to see things turn around, albeit slow, but people are committed. Like the call centres, people are committed. Doesn't matter where they're working. They get laid off, they want to come back. I talk to people every day, both in the call centre industry that have been laid off in my area, or let go, unfortunately, because of no notice kind of closing. But these people want to come back and work in these good locations because they're solid, and the jobs are solid, and they've been there for a long time. These are good paying jobs. The call center jobs, I know, as I said, they're not paying $50,000 a year, but people lived on that, believe it or not. It was a lower income, but people did manage because it was good work, and the people running it were thought to be reputable, and certainly until the day they closed. I know there were challenges within the corporation, the call center itself, and the management team. They had great challenges as well, but those people need to be looked after. And October 29th is going to be a hard day for all the people working in these centres, Mr. Speaker, and I know that I'm certain, actually, that the government will do everything they can in the weeks and months ahead. The Premier has said that he intends and has promised to assist the people of Canso and Cheticamp, and we'll certainly hold him to that. More importantly, I hope the people of Cheticamp and Canso continue to hold the Premier responsible in some way to help assist them as they move forward and seek out new employment, as well as the Minister of Economic and Rural Development. He touched on it, rural. Certainly, he spoke about people moving out of rural Nova Scotia and migrating to other places. I'd be interested in knowing at some point, maybe that minister can bring that information forward, what are the numbers about migration, actually? We've seen in the past, people have left Nova Scotia. I know in the early 80s, people were leaving Nova Scotia, but those people have come back. And I know there was a big cry a year or two ago, out migration, out migration. How much has the census changed? It would be interesting to know how many people are actually leaving and how many are not. I know that a lot of people are moving to this more urban center here in the HRM. We see it grow. A very transient population here in the daytime, people coming in from as much as a couple hours away, the valley and different areas of the province to work here in urban Nova Scotia, in Halifax, the HRM, and then, of course, returning home in the evening. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words on this, again, we want to wish the people of Canso and Cheticamp well as they move forward with this unfortunate layoff, and hope that the province will do everything they can to help to support the good people of Canso and Cheticamp. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I will now recognize the honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and pleased to be able to speak to this resolution this evening. It's primarily directed towards Acrobat Research Limited and the loss of jobs in the Canso and Cheticamp area. But I believe it also speaks probably to the heart of what's going on in rural Nova Scotia. And one of the prescriptions that has been given over the past decade to deal with the problems that have already been mentioned, like a reduced economy, out-migration, and the fact that we do have 13 counties in Nova Scotia that continue to lose population. So this is an unfortunate development for these two communities, that these jobs, while not big numbers, 38 and 48 in those communities, do in fact have a very, very big effect. And in fact, I would say that losing those jobs in those two communities has a considerably bigger impact than if those number of jobs were lost here in HRM. And because without that money moving through the community and being at least a multiplier effect perhaps a couple of times. So what it really does then is increase the problems of out-migration as people, especially young people, look elsewhere for work. And this is a real phenomena as to how deeply it has impacted rural Nova Scotia. And I've been a big proponent of this concept of having a Department of Economic Development and Rural Development. Rural development was not attached to economic development when I arrived here at Province House in 2003. So we do at least have that kind of thinking and emphasis that is in the department. And I think now, over the coming months, it will be interesting to see if, in fact, we see from the NDP government a strategy around rural economic development. And I'm just going to, to offer one suggestion for this area. One of the areas that has helped some of our, I guess, mid-sized communities, and I see Shetticamp as one of those, is having an Access Nova Scotia. And currently there are 10 Access Nova Scotia locations in the province: Yarmouth, Bridgewater, Kentville, Halifax, of course, Dartmouth, Lower Sackville, Truro, Amherst, Antigonish, Port Hawkesbury, Sydney. But, I think Shetticamp would be a prime area for the location of an Access Nova Scotia, and to have a bilingual service offered to the citizens of that community, and we all know surrounding communities. I think it does provide a great service. It provides a number of jobs to those areas. And I think when a building or buildings or parts of buildings are emptied by the loss of 38 and 48 jobs, I know government is through workforce development, labor and workforce development, is assisting those workers when they get through to transition to EI, to move to possible other training, but not directly and specifically towards another job. And I think one of the major roles and responsibilities of government and the Department of Economic and Rural Development is to say, what else can we place? What can we go out and look for to help rural communities, and in this case, of course, Shetticamp and Canso. So I offer that to the minister as one of the possibilities. But I also want to relate to my experience so far with the minister and with the new government around rural and economic development, because I believe there are projects, there are ways of being able to incentive communities to work, to provide jobs, and in fact improve their futures. And one of the projects that had been on the go for quite a number of years that I was pleased the minister quickly seized on and supported the community of Harbourville. And it was the final phase, was not a big ask of government, but the minister was receptive to helping the community finish a wharf. And I'll just explain how significant that is, because I know the areas around Canso and Inverness are coastal communities. They have fishing as one of their possibilities. And in the community of Harbourville, they have a limit on the number of boats that they can tie up. And with this development, they're going to be able to increase the number of boats that come from Yarmouth and Wedgeport during the dogfish season. And this was one of the major reasons for getting this wharf finished. And so while it was creating the wharf and tie-up possibility, of course, it was also stabilizing a road and access to cottages that had not been able to be used for some time. So I look at there where now all of a sudden we have a multiplier effect. The wharf is constructed, Dogfish boats come down from western Nova Scotia. They're going to stay. The boats tie up. The fishermen stay in some of the local bed and breakfast and boarding facilities that they have there. They're going to be buying meals. They're going to be buying gas. And all of a sudden, this investment by the province takes on a significant multiplier effect. And I really am looking forward to seeing what maybe happened in Harbourville transplanted in a number of other communities, because there is no question that the NDP government for a number of years now, as long as I've been here, have talked about coastal communities and the vital and vibrant place that they play in the very fabric of what Nova Scotia is all about. And I believe rural and economic development can map out some very small projects, some very small initiatives that will create employment and perhaps hold on to a few more of our youth in those communities. Because it is our youth that really helps to revitalize a community. And I'll just give you the example of the community that I live in, and that is in the Greenwood-Kingston area, which has with an Air Force base of 2,000 employees, with the vast majority between 20 and 40 years of age. And the vibrancy that they create in our community is seen in so many different ways. And there's no question that in our rural communities, holding on to some of our youth with jobs. You have to have a job to stay. And this is the piece now that I think we need to look at and we need to map out, whether it's fishing, forestry, agriculture, tourism, what are the sustainable industries that we can attract? Small, perhaps, value-added pieces to these basic primary industries, I think, are where jobs can be created. So while it's a dark moment for Cheticamp and Canso, I think we have to say optimistically and hopefully, again, government can play a role. I've always been a believer that when there are difficult times, that's the time that government should step in, come forward, and say, we want to be part of solving the problem. And it's a role that I think needs presence of government, whether it's ministers that go down and have those kinds of meetings to initiate and to help spur to bring something into the community. And I think during the course of time, my colleague alluded to NSBI. And I think NSBI and economic and rural development, I think there needs to be some new directions as to the roles that they're going to play. And the part of the Department of Economic Development that I think does need a real series of programs to assist our rural communities, because I personally haven't seen, I guess, actualized and lived out the concept that we often hear, and I hear it, and that is, as Halifax and as HRM goes, so goes the rest of the province. Well, why do we have 13 counties out of 18 that continue to lose their population? I just don't. I don't think it's a realism. I don't think that's the way it's happening, and I think we have to give some attention to what is going on in our small rural communities, and help them to thrive once again, and not to see loss of jobs as we have. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'll take my place.
Thank you. The time has expired for debate on Resolution 308. Chair now recognizes the Honourable House Leader for the official opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill 26?
Bill number 26, the Advisory Council on Mental Health Act. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it gives me great pleasure to rise tonight and speak about a bill that I introduced last week here in the legislature. It is Bill number 26, and the title of the bill is Advisory Council on Mental Health Act. And as I say, this act would be intended to see the province of Nova Scotia create an advisory council that could help to create a strategy for mental health in this province and really map out a blueprint or a path to go forward and help the many, many Nova Scotians who are dealing with mental illness in our province. Mr. Speaker, there are an estimated 118,000 people in Nova Scotia that are suffering from mental illness. It is very pervasive. It is affecting virtually every family, certainly every community, and it is a real tragedy because, Mr. Speaker, even today in this year of 2009, there is still a huge stigma around mental illness. And I've been receiving, since introducing this bill last week, I've been receiving a number of emails from people who live in my area and others who were encouraged that the bill is now on the order paper and something that can be debated and deliberated, and just happy that somebody is talking about this issue. And during the estimates, Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to ask the Minister of Health some questions about our financial commitment to mental health. And I don't want to minimize the many diseases and physical ailments that Nova Scotians suffer, because we're spending the lion's share of our health budget on disease and on acute care, and we are spending less than 4%, Mr. Speaker, on the needs of addictions and mental health. And I think it's worthwhile noting that many of the people who suffer addictions are in fact suffering mental health as well. They have mental health issues and they're seeking some kind of help and often end up being addicted, either becoming alcoholics or addicted to drugs. There is definitely a connection between the two. But, Mr. Speaker, what we need to do in this province is be progressive, move forward, start to speak about the needs of people suffering with mental illness, and put in place the kind of foundations that will allow people to get help in a speedy fashion. It's absolutely tragic to read some of the stories that I've been seeing on a new website called oneinfive.ca. It was just launched last week as well. It's sponsored by the psychiatrists from Dalhousie University, but there is a coalition of mental health care groups that are involved, certainly the Schizophrenia Society, the Canadian Mental Health Association, and others. And that website is a portal to let people tell their stories. It's going to have more and more people speaking on little video clips that you can see on YouTube, also stories where they can write their story about what they are going through. But, Mr. Speaker, the point that comes up time and again is the fact that once people recognize that this problem is not just something small or it's going away, once they realize that this is really mental illness and they have to grapple with it, it is difficult for them when they go to their family doctor to get a referral to any of the psychiatry services in the province. And people are saying that they've waited months while their children, particularly their children or other family members, literally are falling apart. And I think while we're having a discussion about mental health too, it's very important that we remember that so many of the mental illnesses that have been identified and that we know of exhibit themselves during adolescence and very early in our adulthood. So sort of from the years of 12 to 22 or 23, that's when we find the majority of schizophrenia or bipolar disorder and just so many other mental health issues, anxiety disorders, obsessive compulsive disorders. They begin to exhibit themselves generally in that age group. And these are our youngest and really our hope for the future. And to see your children suffer with any of those very difficult challenges and not to have the opportunity to access expert advice or help in a timely fashion, Mr. Speaker. That's the key here, is setting up the mechanisms and the programs that will help people quickly. So even if you didn't see the psychiatrist right away, you know, I'm sure there are programs that could let you see others that would be a support group for you, or to see other counselors that, you know, that perhaps are not at the same level as a psychiatrist, where psychiatrists can actually prescribe medication. But often just to have somebody to talk to and have some help and guidance as you work your way through this very difficult area of mental illness. Because, you know, frankly, Mr. Speaker, it's very perplexing to family members when they see somebody they know well and love changing. They see their behavior changing, they see them withdrawing from friends and family, and they don't know what to do. And we definitely need to have a strategy and a game plan in place to help those many, many people in Nova Scotia. So, Mr. Speaker, the idea of this bill, and because I do want to speak to it directly in the few minutes I have, the bill is intended to set up a council that would be not unlike our Advisory Council on the Status of Women, something that has been in place for a long time in this province, that researches and advocates on behalf of women. This council would be on top of the best practices and the best ways to treat mental illness in our society. And my intention in presenting the bill, I've actually laid out what the makeup of the council could be. It would include 2 professional educators with specialization in mental illness or mental health issues, 2 psychiatrists, 2 mental health consumers, because we need the voice of those that know what it's about and know how hard it is to work within our current system, and 2 family members that can represent the difficulties that families have in trying to help and support their loved ones. So that would be the makeup of the council as I envision it in the bill. And the council would be there to advise the Minister of Health and the government on policies, programs, and priorities that are aimed at addressing the mental health needs of Nova Scotians. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, right now, out of a health budget of it's almost $3.5 billion, at $3.5 billion, we are spending $119 million on addictions and mental health services. And I know that the minister agrees with me that that is not enough. And I am confident that she, over her years as a social worker and a community worker, does understand how widespread and how painful really it is for families and community and for our society to realize that we have so many Nova Scotians afflicted with mental illness of one degree or another. And as I say, what makes it so sad is to see how many young people are struck with this illness, and it is again not recognized, not well understood, and there's a huge stigma associated with it, so that families, and in fact, one of the stories that I had looked at just recently on the Mr. Speaker, on the website 1in5.ca, one of the stories is actually said that they have their son living with them, and nobody knows of his mental illness and the anxiety disorders he has except the family members. And that just shows you that people are ashamed and unable to vocalize what's going on. They certainly are not finding the help they need from their family physicians or in the community. And we need more and better services out there. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to mention that here in Halifax we have a group called Lang House, and they were at the press conference to launch the 1in5.ca website, which again is a way to break down those barriers, Mr. Speaker. And I would ask that all members of the House look at that website, 1in5.ca, and of course it refers to the fact that 1 in 5 Nova Scotians, 1 in 5 people suffer from mental illness and depression and other forms of mental illness. And that is so pervasive we don't realize it, Mr. Speaker. And I would ask that we all go there and have a read and listen to what Nova Scotians are saying about the problems that they are facing in accessing services. And Mr. Speaker, the bill that we are here to discuss today is one step towards a solution. And that's why I wanted to raise it and have it on the floor today and allow the minister what I think she would welcome as an opportunity to just address it for a few minutes so that we can also see that she does understand the need. And I know that this is something that we can't fix overnight, but we could certainly start by putting in place a council of advisors that represent the experts in the industry and the people who know firsthand what it's like to live with mental illness, and allow them to help guide us in creating a mental health strategy for Nova Scotia, because that is where we need to be. And in the press conference last week, Mr. Speaker, one of the members that spoke, one of the representatives on the panel who represented the Schizophrenia Society, was asked if there was one thing we could do right away, what is it? And his answer was very quick. He said, we need a mental health strategy in Nova Scotia. That would start to lay out the blueprint for us to go forward. Mr. Speaker, I know my time is now past, so I welcome hearing the comments from the other members of the legislature on this very important bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair now recognizes the Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to say that I'm very pleased to have an opportunity to speak about a topic that I consider of the utmost importance in terms of my responsibilities as Minister of Health. The Department of Health is committed to improving mental health services in Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, we want to make services more accessible, more available, more community-based as well, and ensure they're designed in a way that meets people's needs and offers appropriate care. And we work through the district health authorities primarily as they find ways to deliver both inpatient care and community-based services. And the honourable member is quite correct in saying that it's a very small portion of the overall provincial budget that's dedicated in the Department of Health to the provision of health care services for people with mental health disorders. It's under 4% of our budget. And you know, before I was on this side of the House in government, I remember sitting on the Public Accounts Committee when the former Deputy Minister of Health was in front of us, and she talked about her concern and the concern of the department, and regret really that the field of mental health services continues to be an area that is undeveloped or underdeveloped in terms of the real needs. And we see this particularly around children and youth. We see the very, very long time to get seen for assessments and for treatment. Although additional resources have been provided to the IWK, and I think 6 new beds were given to them for in-house services. It continues to be an area where there is a struggle. I know myself, as someone who's worked in the mental health field and who has worked with children and youth, you know, one of the things that's very difficult is on families is the wait. You know, when you need services with children who are experiencing difficulty either because they have developed a psychosis or an eating disorder, or their behavior has gone beyond the point of kind of the normal behavioral problems you might see with most children as they test the boundaries and they deal with you know, the kinds of things that they encounter as they grow, both physically and mentally. These kids, when they encounter these difficulties, they can't wait for treatment and assessment. They need it right at the time, and families need it right at the time, and school systems where these children are engaged, they need these services right at that moment. And so we need to be very cognizant of this, and we need to look at what is it that could provide a better response. I was really pleased that earlier this week, my colleague, the Minister of Education, and Dr. Stan Kushner, a psychiatrist who's relatively well known, I would say, not only in the province but outside of the province, for his expertise in the area of child and youth mental health, launched a curriculum program in our school system now to really heighten the awareness of young people about the whole issue of mental wellness, and but not just mental wellness, but to start the conversation in our schools with young people about the need to be able to express how you're feeling, and that this is a part of maintaining good mental health, and being able to identify when you have, maybe feelings that are troubling to you, that you need to find someone you trust to express this to, and not be fearful that you can't express yourself and reach out and ask for the kind of support. And there is research, Mr. Speaker, that does indicate that the earlier the intervention, the more likely that there is a positive prognosis in terms of treating people who have mental health disorders. So certainly this is an area that I've been interested in for much of my adult life, and I continue to bring that interest into the work that I'm doing now. During the provincial election, the coalition that the honourable member spoke of had a press conference at the Bloomfield Centre in my constituency association to talk about the need for a mental health strategy, a provincial mental health strategy, and I attended that press conference, and it was very moving to hear the spectrum of perspectives that were presented, the psychiatrists who are working in the field, as well as psychologists and social workers, other healthcare providers, family members who have struggled for years with coping with having a member of the family with a mental health disorder, and the lack of services and the lack of support sometimes for family members who really need good information, need to be brought into the treatment process, and need to have more opportunity to understand what it is that they can do to be supportive to a member of their family who has a mental health disorder. Additionally, there were people who had suffered through the process of having a mental illness at this press conference, and of course their experience recounted often very passionately is very moving to hear. The idea that the honourable member has brought forward in this bill of having a mental health council is something that we would certainly look at in the process that we're going through right now. In the department, there is a review of mental health services being conducted as part of the health transformation process. We know that there are areas of our province that are extremely underserviced, and there are areas of the province where services are more robust. There are no areas of the province where we are overserviced in this area. We have some wonderful, innovative programs here that are really worth acknowledging. The Mobile Crisis Program, the Mobile Crisis Unit, which started out of the North End Clinic, actually, in the North End of Halifax in my constituency, is a fantastic service. And it's something that I'm sure other DHAs, particularly Cape Breton, for example, might find very useful for their population. I will have an opportunity to meet with Michael Kirby, who is the Federal Commissioner for Mental Health Services, recently appointed by the federal government. I believe I'll be meeting with him in within the next week or so, and I look forward to that meeting. He has done a lot of work across the country and has, I think, information on best practices elsewhere that will be very useful as we reassess where we are, where it is we want to go. But I want to assure the honourable member who brought forward this bill and all members that mental health services are a priority for this government. We look forward to developing and strengthening, building on what's there. And we are very open to having conversations with other members in other parties on their ideas that could improve services. So thank you very much.
Thank you. The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to stand today and speak for a brief time on Bill number 26, brought forward by the member for Halifax-Clayton Park, and I thank the member for Halifax-Clayton Park for bringing this interesting idea and this bill forward for our discussion here in the legislature, and maybe and hopefully at some point to bring forward to enact a true advisory council when it comes to mental health issues in this province. Mr. Speaker, I speak quite often of my time as Minister of Health, and I can speak very fondly of the time that I spent talking about mental health issues. This is one that I wish I could have spent more time on, but of course there's definitely competing priorities when it comes to the day-to-day operations of the Department of Health. But I can tell you some of the best conversations and best work that I think was working with people like Michael Kirby. Michael Kirby, of course, senator, or was a senator, and now is the president or chairman of the Mental Health Commission of Canada, and was so happy to discuss the document that was brought out by the Mental Health Commission of Canada, which is the Out of the Shadows document, and in it outlining more of a plan for Canada as it addresses the issue of mental health in Canada. Now, what is mental health, and what are the things that we would see or not see? Very aptly, the document that Michael Kirby brings to us, Out of the Shadows, simply means that mental illness for generations has been ignored or has been hidden in the shadows. And it's not until probably the last number of years, I don't know if it's 20 or 10 or what have you, that people are now talking about mental illness, are talking about themselves, are talking about their loved ones or their neighbors. The 1 in 5 program that's being brought forward, I think really, I don't know if it surprises people to know that even within our House of Assembly that, we're a pretty, diverse group of people, but chances are 1 in 5 of us have suffered or do suffer for some kind of mental illness, whether that be depression, whether that be bipolar, whether that be schizophrenia, and it can go on and on, Mr. Speaker, of the types of maladies that can afflict the common citizen, common person. When I was minister, we brought forward the program, and I don't recall the program name, but our poster boy was an ex-police officer who suffered from depression, and I forget his name. And I wish I should have done a little more research here, and I wish I would have had the presentation that he did, and it was available online, I think. And I don't know if it's still there, and I'm hoping that it is. And it basically explained his struggle with depression. Now, we wouldn't think that a tough, burly police officer would suffer from some type of mental illness. And he very well explained the symptoms that he did not understand, or the feelings that he had. And he was very, very convincing, very forthright in his explanation of his malady, and how it affected not only himself and his feelings, but the feelings and and what happened with his family and the effect that this had on his family. It's a very, very powerful conversation that he's having with you. And I suggest to anyone who has the opportunity to go on the Department of Health's website, I believe it's still there, and have a look. And I believe that every year the idea was to have another sort of poster person to really underline mental illness in our province. Mr. Speaker, I can say that adding programming in mental health is a slow task. And I know that the minister is aware of this, because it's not only dollars, it's actually having the professionals in order to provide the service, whether it's a psychiatrist, psychologist, counselors, or what have you, and to try to flow. And the challenge that the department, I think, always has is, okay, who do you target? Because this is such a broad population. Do you spend some money on children, which I think is a very important thing, that's what we should be spending as well, but should we be spending on housing issues? Should we be spending on other programming, addictions? So there's always a challenge of having the dollars available and focusing them in one or two different places. I think that by bringing forward an advisory council would help the minister, the department, and not the Minister of Health, but the Minister of Community Services, because there are some major connections when it comes to supporting the mental health community, that they would be able to provide an oversight. Here's where we feel those priorities are, and therefore here's where government should focus. Not unlike what the Disabled Persons Commission brings forward. And the Disabled Persons Commission has been around for many years, has gone through a number of different iterations of structure. And I think today the way it exists within the Department of Community Services is one that truly serves the people with disabilities in this province. And I can say that over the last number of years, there's been tremendous moves forward in supports for people with disability, and also for them to go on their journey of understanding with I guess we could call it the common community. I think today also, with the way that disabilities are treated in our school system, is one that will change Nova Scotians and children's view of disability. I talk to my wife quite often about her experiences in school, who is now a school teacher, and her connection with a number of difficult children that are in the school, and how they're accepted today by the classmates. In my day, these people were separated from the school system, and therefore we never had an understanding of what their disability might be, whether it was psychological, physiological, or what have you. And we never really understood it. But I think the generation that we're bringing up will have truly a better understanding of mental health, of physical disability and disability in our community. So I really have a lot of hope for these communities, because, Mr. Speaker, they are our community, and one that we will have to and shall continue to support. And I don't envy the ministers, I don't envy the government, because in your heart you do want to do more. But there's always that but. To be able to mobilize those services is always a challenge, difficult, and sometimes very, very frustrating. But I know that, as everyone in this House, that when it comes to supporting those who are less fortunate than us, that we'll always do the right thing. So, Mr. Speaker, I can say that the Progressive Conservative Caucus, support the moving forward of Bill number 26, which is the act to create a Nova Scotia Advisory Council on mental health. I very much support the idea of the two professional educators with a specialization in mental health issues, two psychiatrists who are members pursuant to the Medical Act, two mental health consumers, and of course, very important, two family member representatives, because many of these people cannot speak for themselves. Their family members speak for them. And Mr. Speaker, all of us need to speak to these individuals who are so important to our society and the society in Nova Scotia. So, Mr. Speaker, again, thank you for the opportunity to speak to this bill tonight, and I look forward to this proceeding through the House of Assembly for further discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to speak for this bill, and I'd like to start by addressing something that the honourable member from Argyle brought up, which was, of course, cost. And there's so many things that cost money, and a lot of the solutions that this committee might recommend may indeed cost money. But if government doesn't know what those solutions are and isn't able to adequately hear from the stakeholders, then it can't consider those options and it can't consider those costs. And in this case, we're talking about a stakeholder committee, an advisory committee, and the committee in and of itself would have very little cost to the department. In fact, I wouldn't even want to guess what it would be, but a bit of clerk support, and that's probably about it in terms of what it would cost to operate it on an annual basis. And I think that would be the kind of group that could bring forward some creative solutions. Mr. Speaker, over the past number of years, I've been involved with a group called the Affirmative Industries Foundation of Nova Scotia, and I'm not a member of their board or anything like that, but I was involved in helping them get built a building for people who are recovering from mental illnesses. And that is the first of its kind in Nova Scotia. It's on Lakecrest Drive, just off Main Street in Dartmouth. And it's a place where people and their families who are looking to re-enter the workforce can go. They can live, they can build up an equity, much like owning a condominium. They have a safe place to live, they have an encouraging environment, and they can come forward, Mr. Speaker, and get into the workforce, develop work skills to allow them to reintegrate, and then leave after a couple of years with equity built up and purchase a home. And that's sometimes a major challenge for mental health consumers. And those are the kind of creative ideas that, and I believe at the time it was supported by all three parties in this House, when it came forward for a provincial grant and it got a federal grant, and that's really important. And I meet with the folks over there on a fairly regular basis. My constituency office is just around the corner, and those are the kind of creative solutions that can really help mental health consumers reintegrate into the community. And when I say reintegrate, one of the things that some of the residents of that particular building have told me is that's the challenge. They go for a job and somebody will say, well, where have you been working the past few years? And they say, well, I've been on sick leave. It's, oh, was it your back? Was it this? And they struggle with the idea of telling them that it was a mental illness, because as much as the member from Argyle said that it is much more recognized and accepted, and I agree with that, it is still not as recognized and accepted as it is. There's another issue I'd like to touch on, and that's suicide, Mr. Speaker. And I've had the unfortunate situation of having a number of my friends commit suicide over the past few years. And in particular, one story I'd like to share with the House that illustrates the exact need for this House. A number of years ago, just before getting into the journalism business, I had a friend who she was actually the athletic therapist for the Canadian Olympic team, the ski team, and she was one of the top employees in the athletic department at St. Mary's University, a leading person, and she found herself in a number of situations where she, over a period of time, found herself struggling with mental illness, and that progressed, and I dealt with it through this, and so did her family, and there were many people there to support her, and much of what the healthcare system was there to provide to her was drugs, and then admit her to Abbey Lane for a couple of weeks, and maybe that's the only option they felt they had at the time, but I can tell you that every time they put her in Abbey Lane Hospital, she got worse. Every single time. And it's not about the care she received there. It's not about the treatment she received there. It's about the fact that for some people, institutionalization may be the correct course of treatment. For her, it was not. And for so many mental health consumers, it's not. And the long and short of that is that she went down a path where she was immediately pushed from being in an institution to being pushed back into the workplace where she wanted to be. She wanted to be in the workplace, but without the appropriate supports, without the things that could make her succeed there. And in that case, without a particularly understanding and knowledgeable employer. And I don't blame the employer in this either. It was a situation where the employer simply didn't have the tools and the resources to reintegrate somebody who, you know, if we want to think dollars and cents, was going to go back and start paying tax dollars and income tax instead of costing us by having her locked up in an institution. And Mr. Speaker, there's something fundamentally wrong with that, where we ended up having a system where it cost more money and it was less effective to have that happen. And you know, I've since talked to a lot of people who are certainly experts in suicide prevention, much more so than I would ever pretend to be. And they pointed out very clearly to me that that happens over and over and over again. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member from Clayton Park, Halifax Clayton Park, pointed out to me that there was a study last year, or earlier this year, that said there's about on average 80 suicides a year in Nova Scotia. But the thing is, that's the ones that say on the death certificate suicide as the cause of death. Well, guess what? My friend's death certificate did not say suicide, and you know, I'd be happy to go and get it for you because there was an autopsy and the whole bit. It did not say that because it wasn't the thing to put on that death certificate, and so many of them don't say that. And there's a lot of reasons why that isn't. It's there's a stigma to it, so why would you put suicide on there? In fairness, you know, if somebody dies in a car crash and the car crash was the result of a cardiac arrest, do they put cardiac arrest or do they put a car crash as the cause of death? Well, you know, it's the same sort of situation where sometimes I would argue that in many cases the suicide is precipitated by other issues, and it's not something that just affects adults. In fact, when we look at young people between the ages of 15 and 24, it's estimated that 18% of people in that age group, 15 to 24, Mr. Speaker, 15 to 24. That's from the start of high school to the end of university, or at least the end of the first degree, or the end of a community college degree for most people. In that age group, 18% of those people have a mental illness or a substance abuse problem. That is a staggering number. That is enormous. And what's worse is, of those, only 20% are actually able to get treatment because of funding restrictions. And now, I am not going to stand here. This is not an issue that I can stand here and say that the Minister of Health can solve this problem tomorrow. She can't. I would never ask her to stand and do that, Mr. Speaker, because it's not possible. But it can be solved, I think, over time. And one of the first steps, a cost-effective step, and a step that will make a real difference in Nova Scotia and make Nova Scotia a leader in this field, is to establish a mental health advisory council that will be able to advise the government and people who are in the field and will be able to devote all their time, because as the member for Argyll said, the Minister of Health is not the Minister for mental illness. She cannot spend 100% of her time on this file, and nor would we expect her to do so, because there are many pressing issues. But to have valuable advice that can make recommendations, and very often creative solutions that don't come from the bureaucracy of government, can make a lot of sense. And that gets back to the example I gave early on with the Affirmative Industries building, where you know, that is creating change for people. That is creating real change for people who now have jobs, people who are building equity, people who have their families with them, and are making sure that they don't lose their families. And if you look, there are so many people who suffer from mental illnesses and struggle with that, and they end up losing their families as well. So they lose everything. They lose their health. They feel they're not supported. They lose their families. They often lose their job. Many of them end up on community services because they don't know where to turn. This is in so many levels, this is a win-win solution, Mr. Speaker. And I really would encourage the government to very seriously consider this bill. The government has previously said that, you know, as we get towards the end of the session, they would look at calling some bills from the opposition for a vote. This is one that I think makes a lot of sense. It's certainly one that falls in line with the principles that the government has espoused, as well as something that I know the member from Halifax Clayton Park has lobbied for a long time, and something that I personally believe will make a difference and will help us challenge and make a real difference in the lives of people in Nova Scotia. When we look around and understand that 1 in 5 Nova Scotians suffer from mental illness, that is a lot. That's 181,000 people that we can begin to do better for. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the time here this evening, and I encourage the government to call this for a vote at some point in the near future.
Thank you. The time for debate on Bill number 26 has expired. The chair recognizes the Honourable the House Leader for the official opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That completes the opposition's business for today. I'd now like to turn it back to the Government House Leader.
Thank you. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to report business for tomorrow. After the daily routine and question period, we will do supply debate. Then, if time permits, we will do bills 1 and 2. So I now wish we do now rise to meet the hours tomorrow between the hours of 2 p.m. and 10 p.m. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for the House to rise and meet again tomorrow at the hours of between 2 and 10 p.m. Is the House ready for the question? The question has been called. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Those against, motion carried. The House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon.